If you're an American saving for retirement, there's a good chance you're doing everything right and still heading towards something profoundly uncertain. If you want to understand what no one explains to you about this, sign up now, because this video can completely change the way you see your future. You work, you save money, you invest, you follow all the rules. 401k, IRA, Roth IRA, diversification, long-term, discipline, everything exactly as they said it should be done. And yet, there's a question that almost no one dares to ask. What if that's not enough? Not because you made a mistake, but because the system wasn't designed to protect you. Think about it for a second. You are putting your future in something that you have no control, you don't foresee it, and it changes completely, without asking your permission. Still, you were taught to trust. Invest for the long term. The market always goes up. Be patient. But let me ask you honestly, do you really believe that? Or have you simply never stopped to question it? Because there is a huge difference between following a plan and understand the game. And most people are just following along, without realizing that a silent risk is growing behind the scenes. A risk that doesn't show up in the graphs. It doesn't appear on the statements, but it's always there. And here's the first thing you need to understand. They said you're in control. But control over what? You have no control over when the market falls. He has no control over how long it takes him to recover. And you have even less control over whether that will happen. Exactly when you need the money the most. This is not control. This is disguised addiction. And the more you believe you are safe, the less you realize how exposed you are. This is the point where most people stop thinking, but this is exactly where you should start. Because this didn't start with you. This was built up over time. And to understand what's really going on, we need to go back a bit. Going back to a time when retirement meant something completely different. For decades, retirement in the United States was not an issue. It was a promise. You worked for years. And in the end, there was something concrete waiting for you. A stable income, predictable, lifetime. You didn't need to get the market right. There was no need to choose assets. There was no need to worry about economic cycles. It wasn't his responsibility. It belonged to the company. And that completely changes the nature of the risk. Because the risk existed, but it wasn't in his hands. Now compare that to today. Today, you need to decide how much to invest, where to invest, when to adjust. You need to understand the market, even if you were never prepared for it. What if something goes wrong? The responsibility is yours. Without warning. Without real protection. No warranty. And this is where one of the most important phrases in this video comes in. A pension was a promise. A 401k is a gamble. This change didn't happen overnight. She was slow, gradual, almost invisible. And perhaps that's why almost no one noticed how big it was. The promise has not disappeared. She was outsourced. Companies have reduced risk. The system continued to function, and the individual took on the burden. But here's the most dangerous detail. This transition was accompanied by a narrative. A powerful narrative. Now you have freedom. Now you're in control. Now you decide your future. And that sounds good. Very good. But there is a difference between freedom and responsibility without protection. Because when you look closely, you realize that this freedom comes with conditions. You remain dependent on the market. It remains exposed to volatility. You remain vulnerable to events that are beyond your control. The only thing that changed? It was he who absorbed the impact. First, institutions. Now you. And this creates a scenario where everything seems fair. Until something goes wrong. And when things go wrong, there is no safety net. Now answer me honestly, were you truly prepared to take on this kind of responsibility? Or they simply put it in their hands, and they called it freedom? If this makes sense to you, comment, "It makes sense," and leave a like. This helps this content reach more people who haven't yet noticed this change. Because what comes next makes this problem even deeper. It's not just about who took the risk. It's about how the system works behind the scenes, using exactly the money you are investing. And that changes everything. When you invest with retirement in mind, it's natural to imagine something simple. Your money is there, saved, growing with time, a line slowly rising, until the day you need it. But that's not what actually happens. In practice, your money goes into a system, an active system, complex, and in constant motion. He doesn't stay still. It is used, borrowed, reinvested, leveraged. He moves around financial institutions, funds, banks, large structures that operate on a much larger scale than they appear on your screen. And here's the point that changes everything. Your money doesn't sit idle. It works. But not just for you. It helps to sustain the very system that you depend on. And this creates a silent, but extremely important dynamic. Because while you're thinking long-term, the system is currently operating. Generating fees, moving capital, maximizing efficiency. And regardless of what happens to your result, these gears keep turning. Now think about it. You take the risk. The system guarantees remuneration. Small fees, almost invisible, but constant, year after year, even when the market falls, even when you lose value. And that changes the logic of the game, because it means the system doesn't necessarily depend on your individual success. It depends on the continuous flow of capital, and you are part of that flow. Now let's take another step. What happens when the system starts to come under pressure? When the market falls? When there is instability? When there is a real risk of large-scale loss? You've probably heard this before. We need to protect the market. People depend on this for retirement. But pay close attention to what lies behind this narrative. When the market goes up, nobody talks about protection. It's a merit. It's efficiency. That's capitalism in action. But when it falls, the discourse changes completely. When the market goes up, it's capitalism. When it falls, it becomes everyone's problem. Privatized gains, socialized losses. And that's not just a strong statement. It's a pattern, because the financial system, when threatened, it becomes a collective problem. And here an uncomfortable question arises. When they say they are protecting people's retirement, who exactly are these people? Because this protection, it is not distributed equally. And this brings us to a point that is almost never discussed openly: inequality within this system. But before we get into that, let me ask you something directly. Have you ever stopped to think that your money is being used in this way? If this opened your eyes in any way, comment, "I didn't know that," and leave a like, because that shows this content needs to reach more people. And the next part, this is where the story starts to get even more uncomfortable. Because when we talk about retirement, it seems like we're talking about everyone. But we are not. When we talk about retirement, there is an implicit assumption that everyone is participating, that everyone has investments, that everyone is building something for the future. But that's not the reality. A large portion of the population, there's not much, or practically nothing invested. About that, a much smaller segment concentrates the majority of the capital within the market. And this completely changes how the system reacts. Because when decisions are made to protect the market, they don't affect everyone in the same way. We talk about retirement as if everyone has one. But in practice, the system responds much more intensely to those who have more money within it. And this creates a silent distortion, because the narrative is collective, but the impact is uneven. Now connect that to something even deeper. For this system to continue functioning, assets need to go up, always. Stocks need to appreciate in value. Funds need to grow. Real estate prices need to get more expensive. Constant growth. This is the fuel. But there is an inevitable side effect to this. If assets go up, prices go up along with that. And this directly impacts real life. Primarily in something essential. Housing. More expensive houses, higher rents, more difficult access. And this is where a conflict arises that almost no one talks about openly. If your retirement depends on prices rising forever, someone will foot the bill. And often, it will be future generations who pay the price. Younger people, trying to enter a system that is already inflated. Starting from the back, with more difficulty, with less margin for error. Do you see the paradox? The same system that promises security in the future. It makes the present more difficult for others. And this is no accident. It's a direct consequence of how everything was structured. Now let's take it to the next level, because all of this points to a bigger problem, a structural problem. This system depends on continuous growth, without long pauses, no deep falls, without ruptures. But the real world doesn't work that way. Crises happen, markets collapse, unexpected events arise. And when that happens, the system is under pressure. And when he is under pressure, someone absorbs the impact. And they are almost never the strongest structures. A system that only works when everything is going up is not stable. It's too optimistic. It depends on ideal conditions. All the time. And that is not sustainable without consequences. Now pause for a second. Because here we arrive at the most important point of all. It's not about saying you shouldn't invest. It's not about abandoning the system. It's about understanding where you're really stepping, and that changes everything. But before closing, answer me one thing honestly. Do you still see your retirement as something secure or as something dependent? If this has already changed your way of thinking, comment, "Changed my view," and leave a like. This helps this content reach more people who haven't questioned this yet. Because the conclusion, that's not what most people expect, and it can be uncomfortable. So now, let's be direct. After all this, the question is no longer, does this work? The question is, what do you do knowing this? Why not? This is not an invitation to stop investing. It's not about leaving the system. It's not about completely ignoring the market. Participation is still required. But here's the difference that almost no one makes clear. Participation is not the same as being protected. You might be inside, following all the rules, doing everything right, and yet still be exposed. Because investing doesn't eliminate risk. He reorganizes the risk. And when you understand that, your way of thinking changes. You stop seeing your retirement as something guaranteed, and he begins to see it as something conditioned, market-dependent, in due time, to events that you cannot control. And this is not meant to create fear. It's meant to raise awareness. Because awareness changes behavior, and behavior shapes results. The greatest danger is not the risk itself. It's a false sense of security. It's believing that you are protected, when in fact, he is only participating. And that's a very fine line. Now think about this. If the system keeps working, regardless of you, if he doesn't know who you are, he doesn't understand his reality, it doesn't fit your current stage of life, why do you believe he will protect you in the end? This is a reflection that almost no one makes. And perhaps, it's the most important of all. Because when you understand this, you start making different decisions, more aware, more strategic, less based on assumptions, and that doesn't guarantee results, but it increases clarity, and clarity is power. Now tell me, has this changed the way you view your retirement? Leave a comment below and give it a like. This helps this content reach more people who still believe they are completely in control. And if you want to continue delving deeper into this type of analysis, click on the video that is currently appearing on the screen. Because the sooner you understand the game, the better you play. And in the end, your retirement depends on a system that doesn't know who you are, doesn't see you, and doesn't adapt to you. And perhaps the most uncomfortable truth is, it was never designed for that.